Hey guys, it's 420dragon here. And a lot of people have been asking me to make a tutorial on how to play the Esper familiar combo deck that I play almost exclusively at this point in Pauper. I mean, of course I do. Love to mess around. I love Pauper as a format. And I love brewing. But I love Esper familiars way more than both of those things. So I'm gonna first we can just go over the deck list and why I made some of the choices that I made, and then next we can go about learning how you guys can actually execute the combo yourselves in a time efficient manner and not lose a million matches to time. So first we have to wait for Magic Online to load, and that's fine. That is fine. Get to see all my old outdated decks with Peregrine Drake and Cloud of Fairies and stuff, and my 3 decks that I actually have the cards for. So here is the list that I've been playing. This is the list that I top 8'd the challenge yesterday with, and it's only a couple cards different from the list that I top 8'd a week ago with. So let's start off with the mana base. We have 4 Ash Barrens, 6 bounce lands here with a 3/3 split. What is this, 5 islands? 6 islands. A Tranquil Cove, which is a new addition. A Swamp, a Plains, and 3 Evolving Wilds. So this gives us 7 fetch lands, which can go get whichever basic we want. And 6 bounce lands. The bounce lands are one of the cruxes of this deck. They really allow you to pull ahead in the mid and late game against other value-based decks, and they really make it. They just help add to the deck's card advantage suite. They go very well with compulsive research. They fix your mana. And hey, they even help you generate extra mana with Snap. These lands are my absolute favorite, some of my absolute favorite cards in the deck. I've toyed around with going up to 7 or even 8 in some cases. But ultimately I think 6 is a good number because you don't want to expose yourself too much to Stone Rain type of effects post-board, because those are some of the best cards against this type of strategy. And then, let's see, what else was I going to say? Going on to the creature base, we have 6 familiars in the main deck, and I think, yeah, I'm still playing 1 extra familiar in the sideboard. That extra familiar in the sideboard is there for matchups where you want to race, because if you're able to get a familiar on turn 2 or turn 3 uncontested, it's very hard to compete with that. So these cards are, again, one of the big cruxes of the deck. They just allow you to make a shit ton of mana, and they turn your snaps into absolutely insane cards. And they basically turn all the blue cards in the deck into completely broken cards. Next we have the cantrips. We have 1 Brainstorm and 4 Preordains. I'm playing Brainstorm mostly as like a late game card. It's kind of like a cheaper compulsive research is the idea. A lot of the time, because this deck has so much card draw, a lot of the time, like, the only way that you can actually lose in the late game versus a lot of decks is if you just like flood out and draw too many lands, or like don't draw enough lands. And Brainstorm doesn't really help too much when you don't draw enough lands, but if you've got a handful of lands, one Brainstorm top deck can really just swing the game. A lot, like, it's basically a functional 1 mana of compulsive research if you have like 3 or 4 lands that you're not going to use in your hand. And then we have God Pharaoh's Faithful. This is a new card from Hour of Devastation, and I've heard some people not like this card very much, but I think this is actually one of the best cards in the deck. This is like one of the reasons that I feel very comfortable playing familiars in this sort of metagame where there's a lot of like decks that are trying to kill you, like Stompy, decks that are trying to burn you out, like Kuldotha and even Is It Delver. And we of course do have 2 more copies in the sideboard just to max out versus like Burn, Stompy, anything that's going really balls to the wall is aggressive. And then next we have Snap. Snap is actually, it's one of the best cards in the deck. It's probably the best card in the deck, realistically. It just does so much. Snap, basically it's a ritual. A lot of the time you're gonna have either a familiar out or multiple bounce lands. You actually only need 1 bounce land for it to make a blue mana by itself, which is pretty absurd considering that you're playing 6 of them. And then once you have a familiar out, it starts to get absolutely insane. Like once you make Snap cost 1 mana and untap multiple blue sources, you're just basically doing it at that point, and it's very hard to stop. The thing about Snap is that a lot of people think that it's like they don't understand that like you can just like evoke like with 2 familiars out. A very common play that I'll make is like, let's say my hand's Moldrifter and Snap and I've got 2 familiars on the board. You can just evoke your Moldrifter, snap it back to your hand, and you basically got Ritual Divination card like stapled together, which is just absurd. We have the full 4 copies of Compulsive Research. This is another one of the best cards in the deck. Cards like this just allow you to have incredible resiliency and are part of the reason why I love this deck so much. In the mid and late game, even the early game, Compulsive just helps you sculpt a good draw. And it also helps you fight through like attrition decks like blue-black or decks with counterspells. Compulsive is one of the main reasons that you're able to have such an insane matchup versus those decks. Next we have 3 Ghostly Flickers. I usually hang out around 2 or 3 of these, but I think 3 is good for the Esper versions. There's a lot of things to flicker. You can flicker your Seagates, your Muldrifters, your Demonic Walls, and of course your new Prosperous Pirates. But a lot of the time, Flicker is just going to be a card draw spell. You're just going to be drawing extra cards with your Flicker. And something that I think a lot of players might not be immediately looking out for is that Island is one of the better Flicker targets. Especially like if you have 2 familiars out and a Muldrifter and a Flicker in your hand, you can, again, similar to the Snap combination, evoke the Muldrifter, draw 2 cards, and then Flicker it and your Island, and then the Flicker was free because you have 2 familiars out. So that's pretty insane, and a play that I make pretty commonly. Next we have 3 Mnemonic Walls. Mnemonic Wall is a part of the combo, but it's also much more than that. It's a part of the combo, and it's a part of our incredible late game. Like it's almost impossible to grind this deck out simply because we have Reaping the Graves and Mnemonic Wall. Which means that in the late game, even against counter-heavy decks, we're just able to at some point resolve a Reaping for like 3 or 4, and then, I mean, they can't counter all the copies of it. Getting back some like Mnemonic Walls, Prosperous Pirates, Muldrifters, it really doesn't matter. And this is also how you can get your FAMs back in the case that your opponent might kill all of your FAMs. And so yeah, you just get a ton of value and just basically out-late game every deck with Reaping the Graves. And that's kind of like a common theme with this deck, is that you really just generate insane amounts of value, and that's a lot of the time how you win. You can of course have like absurdly busted turn 4 kill draws with like Snaps and like Prosperous Pirates out a Mnemonic Wall and then just Flicker combo them, and that's super sweet, don't get me wrong. But I think the main draw to this deck for me is just being able to play, like, is being able to have that turn 4 potential while also playing like an insane defensive core of like Muldrifters, Godfarrow's Faithfuls, Sunscape Familiars, and like Seagate Oracles. And another thing that I've heard some people talk about is they've asked why I'm running 4 Sunscapes over 4 Nightscapes. So I think that in general in this deck, white is a more important color than black. You see you've got the sideboard cards here with Stonehorns and Godfarrow's Faithfuls. You've got the main deck, Godfarrow's Faithfuls, and Din Robohor is not really a card. This is mostly just a kill condition. But so, I also think that the 03 is incredibly relevant on Sunscape Familiar. because it allows you to block a lot of the creatures in the format. A lot of the creatures in the format are just like going to be 2-powered dorks or like 1-powered dorks. Like even like Ninja, the D-Bower, is like an absolute powerhouse in the Pauper format. Is just completely brick walled by Sunscape Familiar. So I think that Sunscape Familiar is markedly better than Nightscape Familiar in that you don't have to leave up mana to have it be an efficient blocker. And the thing about this deck is that it does want to spend a lot of its mana every turn, because you're going to be like Muldrifting into more Muldrifters, into Sea Gates, into all sorts of different card draw spells. So you just want to be able to spend all of your mana every single turn and eventually get to your combination. So there's 21 lands total, which I think is a good number. You could try out 20, but I like to be safe. I think hitting land drops with this deck is very good. Like if you're just able to get to turn 5 versus like any sort of mid-range deck, and you just hit all your land drops and you're not immensely behind on board, the game should be very easy to win. So let's see, what else is there? Oh yeah, another thing about Mnemonic Wall is that in the late game, Mnemonic Wall is an absolute powerhouse, aside from just getting back Reaping the Graves, because it can just get back the Ghostly Flicker, and I think we all are pretty familiar with the Ghostly Flicker combo at this point. You can just blink Mnemonic Wall and any other creature, and then it basically is 3 mana to trigger any of your Enter the Battlefield effects. And with 2 familiars out, it obviously becomes 1 mana, which is insane. And that is where the big combo comes in, with the new card, Prosperous Pirates. This card is pretty sweet. I like it a lot. So once you have Mnemonic Wall, Prosperous Pirates, Ghostly Flicker, and 2 copies of either Nightscape or Sunscape Familiar, you can, of course, make infinite mana by triggering your Prosperous Pirates for 1 mana infinity times. So yeah, that's pretty dope. And then the combo finish is, of course, you can loop Compulsive Researches with double Mnemonic Wall Flicker, though I found that takes an exorbitant amount of time, and I've only actually had to execute that kill, I think, 2 times against a Gond deck that was able to get its combo off and gain infinity life. But typically the kill that I use is just to play Dinrova Horror, Ghostly Flicker it and Mnemonic Wall X amount of times, where X is the amount of permanence that my opponent has on the battlefield. Clear their board completely, and then just press F6 and hit attack with all creatures a couple times. And that seems to be a pretty time-efficient way to get the kill, and there's basically nothing in the format that can stop that, except for like Mountain Lightning Bolt, which God for His Faithful can deal with. So yeah, that's the main deck. Going on to the sideboard, we have 3 Spell Stutter Sprites. These are basically good against Delver. Delver is probably the worst matchup for this deck. They have a quick clock coupled with meaningful disruption. They're like, what I mean to say is that like a lot of the black decks in the format, while they are like able to kill your familiars or kill your creatures or whatever, like basically all of that hard work is undone by like 1 Muldrifter, 1 Compulsive, like 1 Flicker on, like 1 big Flicker on your Muldrifter and Seagate. It just ends the game against any black deck. And so the ways to actually beat this deck are like with Delver type strategies, where they're able to present a quick clock and actually counter your creatures to stop you from getting like the Enter the Battlefield effects. So yeah, we already talked about the other familiar. It's for like when you want to race. And Hoodwink, this is a card that I've gotten some flack for, though I like it a lot. It's kind of just like a little Swiss Army knife to me. I like playing it over Boomerang because blue mana in this deck is extremely important. Like 1 blue, 1 colorless cost is actually like a million times better than double blue cost in this deck. And the ability to basically bounce your opponent's bounce lands is, I think, pretty useful against the slower decks of the format, which is, I don't know, you're good against those decks anyway, so maybe you don't need it, but where I think it's like actually useful is versus the red-white Monarch decks. In the past, I've felt very favored against those decks, but I don't know. Maybe, like, it must be something about the new combo or whatever, but I feel like they've been getting a bit of an edge recently, and so I wanted a way to like deal with their bounce lands as well as maybe bounce a Journey to Nowhere, trigger an Enter the Battlefield effect, get a familiar back or something, and just go from there. Turn Aside is basically just like to counter Stone Rains. I used to be playing Envelop, but somebody brought this card to my attention, and I'm pretty sure it's better. Because like any sort of Stone Rain effect is the absolute worst for this deck. Hydroblast is for affinity and of course burns. I typically don't bring it in against Blue-Red Delver. The Dispel is just for like random blue decks. You can just bring it in against pretty much every counterspell deck. And then these are like the real powerhouse sideboard cards. Stonehorn Dignitary is insane against a lot of this deck's bad matchups. Like Stompy, well, I wouldn't call it a bad matchup. It's definitely insane there. But the real matchups where it does the most work are versus the blue-white, what's that deck called? Tyler's Tribe deck, the blue-white Tribe deck, and the blue-red Kiln Fiend deck. Those decks have historically been very bad matchups for this style of deck. And so the ability to just shut them out of attacking with a Flicker Loop involving Stonehorn Dignitary is invaluable in those matchups. And we already talked about how good Godfarrow's Faithful is. Oh, another aspect about Godfarrow's Faithful that I forgot to touch on is that it actually allows you to have a number of extra infinite life combos. For example, if you have Ghostly Flicker and 2 Familiars and Mnemonic Wall, you're able to flicker your Mnemonic Wall and an island infinity times and gain infinite life with Godfarrow's Faithful. So yeah, I guess another thing that I should talk about is that I'm only playing 2 copies of Prosperous Pirates because unlike Cloud of Fairies or Peregrine Drake, it's not actually generating very much mana the turn that it comes into play, so it's not like a ritual in and of itself. You need it to combine with the other cards before it actually starts generating mana. And yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about the deck. So I think I'm just going to go and play a solitaire game just to show you guys how to combo out. Let's see, where do you go? Constructed open play. Match options. Oops, players. That's what it is. Here we go. Solitaire. Popper. And let's pick KFT fam. Alright, so here we go. We're just going to play a little game of solitaire. This hand is excellent. We have a land, a bounce land, and another land alongside some early Seagate, Muldrifter, and Snap. So I'm going to keep, and we draw another bounce land. Wow, that's nice. So I'm just going to play Island, pass. Wow, that was probably the best draw in our deck. So we're going to go ahead and play turn 2 Familiar. Turn 3 Seagate. Taking a Snap. Typically, unless I'm like, I know that I'm facing Stompy or whatever, and potentially even with this hand against Stompy, I might just take Snap anyway over the Faithful, just because the ability to start generating mana and cards with Snap is pretty absurd. So here, something to think about is that we could float a blue, play the bounce land, evoke Muldrifter, and then snap it, and we would actually generate a white or black mana. So I think I probably would start off by doing that. And obviously this is all contingent on whether or not your opponent has removal up. Like, you don't want to do this into a potential lightning bolt sometimes, but sometimes it is good to risk it. So I'll just go for the snap here. I should have drawn 2 cards first, that was a mistake. So now it's kind of tough. We can either do it again, I think I'll just cast Preordain. It's a pretty low commitment option. It still allows us to find a second familiar off this WoW, which we do. And then we can just play that familiar right now. Snap our Seagate Oracle. Let's see. I guess I'll go ahead and cast a Seagate Oracle. Pick up an Ash Barrens and hard cast a Muldrifter and pass the turn. And you basically just want to keep blue sources. Once you have multiple familiars in play and a source of white and a source of black, blue sources are basically the only thing that matters. Okay, so Ghostly Flicker was obviously a great draw. This is interesting. I'm not really sure what the best way to get to the combo here is. And a lot of times when you're not sure with this deck, you just want to pick something and roll with it. It doesn't matter too much if you made a mistake, just as long as you aren't going to run out of time. Okay, wow, there's the combo. So we drew Prosperous Pirates. We can just go ahead and play Prosperous Pirates. Click on our Flicker and the island. Blink our Pirates. Then we can just go ahead and play Mnemonic Wall. Get the Flicker back. Hit yes. I like to use Alt-Y for yes, as it speeds up the combo quite a bit. And as you can see here, we can just go ahead and make infinite mana. So when you're doing this, you're going to want to auto-yield to both triggers, just so that you can sort of get your combo off, target the Flicker in the graveyard. The Prosperous Pirate triggers get stacked automatically, and you just hit Alt-Y and the Flicker returns to your hand. So yeah, you just do that a bunch of times. And
no, I mean, like, is it still
another thing about it is that
no.
It's actually faster to click the Flicker before sacrificing the treasure for mana, which was a little bit weird when I first started playing the deck. Alright, I'll try and show you guys. So let's see, if we sack this first, you see it lags a little bit, and then I clicked the Flicker too quickly before the blue mana was in my pool. So even though I clicked on both the Mnemonic Wall and the Prosperous Pirates after clicking to sack the treasure for blue, I still didn't cast a Flicker. So you do not want this to happen to you, because if you have to do that 100 times or so, you're almost surely going to time out. So you should just click the Flicker, click both of your creatures, click the treasure, click the blue, and then of course just click the trigger on the wall and get the Flicker back, and the Prosperous Pirates trigger will go on the stack automatically. So once you're doing this, you know, you can just do that basically as many times as you want, doesn't really matter, and then as long as you never run out of mana, you're good. So then you can just do the same thing, auto yield to the Muldrifter triggers, and you know, just sometimes if you have a low deck count or you're scared that you might hit Din River Horror before like in like the last two cards, let's say, of your deck, you can just blink at the Seagate, and then you can basically guarantee that that won't happen. So yeah, you can just go ahead and blink the Seagate, get a Preordain, and when you're going off and you draw a card like Preordain or Compulsive Research, and all you're doing is looking for Din River Horror at this point, you might as well just cast it, because it looks deeper than a Muldrifter trigger or a Seagate trigger. Oh, and this is another interesting kill line that I think a lot of players might not see, is you can actually play a second Mnemonic Wall, get back a Snap, let's say, your opponent's creature, which we'll imagine is my Seagate, untap 2 lands, cast Ghostly Flicker on both of the walls, get back a Snap and a Ghostly Flicker, and then you can actually just do that as many times as you want. You only need a bounce or 2 bounce lands and 1 familiar to do it, or 2 familiars and multiple blue sources. But so that can definitely get you a lot of easy wins versus like decks that care a lot about their board presence, like Stompy, and even versus some decks that don't, like Tron. And yeah, so I guess we'll just keep making our infinite mana. and get this kill on the road. So typically I don't take this long, obviously, because I'm not trying to teach everyone how to combo off. But here we are. So here we go. We'll just make more manas.
They're all gonna die. Wait, yeah, don't get kicked right there. Don't get
just keep doing this. And then we might as well just play another familiar. Get the floating mana out of our mana pool. And just make sure you hit your Alt Fy's or your yes commands as quickly as possible. So I'll just go ahead and fire off a compulsive. It's less clicks than, I don't know, doing the other thing, the flicker. Just do that again. Just snap something. So you can kind of just start freestyling once you have enough mana. Really doesn't matter what you do. As long as you're staying aware of your time. It usually takes me about like 5 or 6 minutes, or like maybe like 7 or 8, depending on the position to combo out. And depending on how long it takes me to draw the Dinroba Horror, but it shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes once you've put in a lot of practice. And 10 minutes is a very generous estimate in my opinion. So yeah, you can just, you know, snap your Mulldrifters, hardcast some Mulldrifters, why not? And once you have 2 flickers, you can even just like spew off a flicker and just flicker a Seagate and a Mulldrifter. Let's see, we draw 2 cards. Are they Dinroba Horror? No. Just gonna snap our guy. Play another Mulldrifter. What else do we do? Just get back on the flicker train. And yeah, so here, this is actually probably one of the more annoying kills that I've had to execute. I mean, not really, since I'm not having to compulsive someone out, but Dinroba Horror is definitely not appearing yet, which is annoying. So yeah, you're just gonna keep making blue mana and drop a Mulldrifter and drop another Mulldrifter and drop Seagate, and there's our Dinroba Horror. So now let's say our opponent has 10 permanents out. You just need to make 10 mana in that case, 10 blue mana that is. Play the Horror, flicker it 10 times, bounce all their permanents. And you can just sort of hit F6 a couple times. So we'll just play Dinroba Horror and bounce our own bounce lands, because obviously we're going to bounce somebody's bounce lands in this video. Just keep doing that. Bounce it. Boom. Oh yeah, imagine if this is your opponent and you're just like, wow, you have no mana anymore. It's just so swag. It's like, damn, Daniel. Alright, so you just bounce all their lands. I like to stack the Horror triggers first and just sort of do it over and over again before I let them resolve, so that I don't have to like wait for my opponent to discard. But it does open up the possibility for you to like target 2 Horror triggers on 1 permanent, which could be annoying if you're a newer player learning the deck. Like if you're a newer player learning the deck, you might want to stack your Mnemonic Wall triggers first in order to, I think technically it's less time intensive to do it that way. Like clock intensive, that is, but it will take more real time to do it that way, which is why I dislike doing it that way. So you just let all your triggers resolve. You can, if you're lazy and you don't want to hit that OK button right there, you can just spend all your mana, right click attack with all, hit F2, Wow, I can block my own creature. Interesting. Okay, so I bounced all their blockers, so they can't block my shit. Discard a bunch of cards. Really doesn't matter. And that's gonna be our turn again. You can just hit F6 basically as soon as possible. Okay, I missed my attack step. Whoops. But you know, typically you don't miss your attack step. And yeah, that's how it goes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial on Esper Familiars, and I hope I see more people pick it up in the future. It's a very fun deck, and it's very powerful as well. So long.